Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's Modern Sales Pros Fireside Chat with Henry Schuck, Zoominfo founder. And we actually just found out that Henry Schuck used to live on the same street, or lives on the street I used to live on in Boston. So super, super small world here. Really excited to have Henry with us. And folks, as you're joining in right now, we're going to have a quick poll that goes up. This is just going to help Henry and I guide our conversation a little bit. So you'll see that pop up. Go ahead and fill that out. And because Henry is a great guy, we've got a lot to cover today. So we're going to jump right into it with a few words about Modern Sales Pros. For those of you who don't know, Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest community for revenue leaders in sales management, sales operations, sales enablement, and the related supporting disciplines. About 20,000 members, and our goal with the community is to create an environment where our members can answer questions they'd otherwise struggle to solve on their own, learn from each other, and learn from amazing leaders in business and folks like Henry. And for those of you who aren't members, you will have the invitation to join the community after today's chat with Henry. But with that, enough about MSP. I'm going to hand it off to Henry to say just a few words about that little company called Zoominfo, who's our sponsor for today as well. Henry?
Great. Thank you, Richard. It's great to be here with all of you. We've obviously been a big fan of the MSP community and really excited about the different flavor of knowledge share that happens there, where people are motivated to share knowledge and not just pitch their products. And it's really well moderated. And so we're really excited to be a member and to have been a member for a while. If you're not familiar with Zoominfo, Zoominfo is a go-to-market intelligence platform that helps over 16,000 go-to-market teams, sales and marketing and sales ops teams find their next best customer. We do that by providing you with data and insights on over 100 million professionals, which make up just about every knowledge working professional in the United States, as well as international data on top of that, and about across 15 million companies. And so our customers are using that data to drive their next motion, to identify their next best customer, to know when to reach out to someone, what to say, how to engage with them. We've built sort of go-to-market in one platform for our customers, and we're really excited about the 16,000 companies we're able to serve every day.
And for those of you who haven't worked with Zoominfo in the past, it's awesome. It makes your life so much easier as a revenue leader. So we're not only, we're also customers of Zoominfo, and it's awesome. Henry, I mean, there's a lot of ground to cover here today. Really, really excited to bring you in to have this chat with the MSP community. And you know, as we jump into it, we're going to start with a little bit of your background and kind of what you were doing, but before you got started with Zoominfo. So just give us the story up until kind of the dorm room idea light bulb goes off.
Sure. So pre starting this, I was actually in law school and had worked at actually a similar company while I was in college that got bought by private equity. And then I left, I went to law school, thought I wanted to be a lawyer, always had kind of an entrepreneurial bent to that. I wanted to open my own law firm and do personal injury law. And so in 2007, I was finishing up my first year in law school at the Ohio State University in Columbus, and started talking to one of the people I worked with at the company in college, and we said, hey, we think there's a huge opportunity in this space. Should we start this up?
It's awesome. And now that's a great cliffhanger, but let's actually talk a little bit more about the founding story of Zoominfo. We're excited to have you join us here today. Zoominfo is it's ubiquitous in a lot of the sales tech stacks. And I'm sure there's a lot of community members who are also part of your customer base. For sure. But the story is actually one that's maybe not as well known. So how did you get things going with Zoominfo once the idea kind of hit you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I see a lot of people talking lately about, you know, should I bootstrap my company or should I take VC money? And today that's become so much more of like a choice and an option for folks. But when we founded what was called DiscoverOrg and turned into Zoominfo in 2007, we didn't really have that option available to us. And so we bootstrapped it. My co-founder and I put $25,000 on our credit cards. And we went out to build a data set and software that allowed sellers and marketers to gain access to that data set for their outbound motions. And then we built a marketing and sales motion. And so here's the product. We knew we understood who the ideal buyer was. It was going to be VPs of sales, VPs of marketing, directors of sales and marketing, directors and VPs of sales ops, which was actually a much smaller title in 2007 than it is today. But we sort of built an audience of those folks. The product originally was really niche. And so we were providing data just on IT decision makers at mid-market and Fortune-ranked companies. And so because it was such a tight product, you also knew which companies you were going to target. You were going to target companies that sold to IT departments. And you were going to target the VPs and sales and marketing at those companies. And so we went out, we built the product sort of in the first 6 months. We thought we got to an MVP. And basically that was the point where if you didn't start selling in the next 60 days, we would just be out of money. And so we went out, we found our first customer was a publicly traded IT staffing firm, became a customer kind of 6 months into the journey and gave us a lot of confidence that this was going to be a product that many sales teams were going to get value from. And the feedback was really positive. And so you said, okay, great. We got this IT staffing firm. We can go run with this as a small segment. Let's go find all the other IT staffing firms and who else is selling to the IT buyer, software companies, and kind of built out a data set of who our potential buyers were. And then we automated a motion to go out and set meetings with them and did a demo and went to close internally. And it was just me and my co-founder and just a couple other folks sort of doing support for the data set and for the marketing and sales motion.
I think that's a great point where really you get this validation when you find your first customer. You're like, oh, all right, cool. Someone's going to buy this. But there's often that time where you're like, ooh, is this thing going to work? Did you happen into the IT staffing firm? How did that actually happen? Your first, as much as you can share, of course, first customer, how'd you get them on board?
So we built this marketing list of companies and people at those companies we thought would be good clients. And then we just sent them emails, and we had a small sample of our product in the email because we were selling data on decision makers. We could give them a PDF of all of that, which they hadn't seen before. So we were sending that out to those decision makers and saying, hey, look, if we think this is something that could help your sales teams and your marketing teams, can we set up a demo to walk you through our platform? And that's how we did it and honestly, through a $25 million run rate in a bootstrapped way. That is the core of how we went to market and found new customers. That's changed a bit today. You can't really go to market in that same way. But for 7 years, that's the way we ran.
And did you say a $25 million run rate bootstrap?
We bootstrapped to a $25 million run rate. Yeah.
That's quite impressive. I think that's I think there's a lot of folks on the call today who would be like, I'd be happy with that.
Yeah.
So how did you, because then you started to take on outside funds around that point, right? And that's what kind of helped you grow to the next iteration. What was that part of the journey like?
Yeah, so we got to $25 million of ARR. We brought in a private equity firm to help us kind of get to the next stage. And one of the things that they were pretty adamant about was to bring in a CFO. And so if you're in sales or you're a CEO or a COO listening to this, maybe your reaction to that was the same as what mine was, no, I got this accounting guy. He's doing all the books. I don't really need a CFO. It's just a waste of money. But fine, if you guys think I must have this high price CFO, then I'll go ahead and bring that CFO in. And so we went out, we did a search, we hired a CFO, and what I was adamant about in that period of time was I need a CFO who has business acumen. I just don't, if we're going to get somebody, I don't really need the same thing I have already, someone who's just doing the books. So we hired our first CFO, and the first thing he did was he came into this business, which even at 25 million of ARR, we were like running and gunning. There wasn't really like a motion that we understood in the business. We didn't know like the leading indicators to success in any given month. We were like, run a campaign, get leads, get it to the AEs, make sure they're following up on them. And that's how we were running it at the time. And he came in and said, look, there's a distinct motion to how you, to the rhythm of this business. Let's like characterize all of the key metrics, and then I will keep track of them every week. We'll bubble them up to all of the leaders, and we can start getting a feel for when we do this, it leads to that. When we do this, it leads to that. And almost all of it in the early days was focused on go-to-market. And so how many phone calls did you make? How many emails did you send? How many appointments did you set? How many showed up? How many didn't show up? How many were becoming opportunities? How many weren't? And so you started to get like a real feel for the rhythm of the business with the data. And you'd go, okay, look, last week we ran this campaign and we set this many meetings. That was a good campaign. Let's go see if we can replicate that and then build a process and a system that does that over and over and over and over again. And so we spent most of the years from 2014 through 2017 kind of iterating and iterating and iterating on that motion. And we were really careful around the funds that we spent, because we were in kind of, again, a niche space. We didn't sell to everybody. Oftentimes we'd go run a campaign, either an SEO or SEM or even an email marketing campaign, and we generate a whole bunch of leads that we couldn't service because we just didn't have a product that helped a company that was selling into finance, for example. And so we were really prescriptive about which leads we wanted to go out and generate, and we wanted to make sure that we were spending dollars to generate the leads that were most likely to close. And really what you see today at Zoominfo is just like a continuous iteration on that. But it all starts with really understanding the rhythm of your business and what are the inputs and what are the outputs that you expect from those inputs. And then how do you tune each of those along the way?
And I think that's always an impressive feat to do. And one of the things I know Zoominfo has done an amazing job of is growing. And you hit on this a little bit, but how big is Zoominfo right now? Actually, how many employees?
So today we're over 1,400 employees and just over $445 million run rate.
Wow. So just a teeny little company there. I knew you guys were big. I didn't realize that you were that big. As you think about growing and you think about the organization, how do you actually foster alignment across high growth organizations? You think CS, sales, and marketing feel like they're always at odds. How did you keep those groups kind of aligned as you were growing?
Yeah, so first, you do it by being really transparent about the data. And once the data is transparent and we all agree that these are metrics that we're going to follow, you just can't hide. You can make excuses for underperformance in any sort of area, but you just can't hide from sort of the obvious facts. And so, if you ask anybody at Zoominfo, they will tell you it's a high performance culture. We're always looking to improve. We're always looking to get better. And what I've challenged all of our leaders across the company around is, we can pontificate about like what sales is going to look like 10 years from now. And we have this big vision and all of this stuff. But operationally, what we're focused on is being best in class all across the company. And that means like if you run accounts receivable, I want someone from the outside to be able to come into our business, look at how you run accounts receivable and go, wow, this is the best run accounts receivable department I've ever seen. And I want that to be the same in product management and sales ops and revenue ops and IT. And I think like once you get people thinking that way, it really drives your ability to change and grow and sort of improve. And I shared actually just this last week with my team, I go through this motion kind of every quarter where I sit down and I go, if a new CEO came in tomorrow and he sat down, he took my role and his first board meeting came 3 months from then, what would he go into the board meeting and say, hey, look, you're so lucky you hired me because that last bum who was here, he messed up all of this stuff. And don't worry, I'm going to fix it all. And so I'm like, okay, what is he going to write in that? And can I be really honest about those things? And then let's go fix them. And by the time I'm done fixing those, there's like another set of what he's going to do, what the new CEO would do. And then I'm challenging each of our leaders to do that in their departments as well. And then hold them accountable for those things.
It seems like there's something there on the hiring front too. You have to find the right people that can kind of be transparent and honest with that. Has that keeping that culture going as you've grown as much as you have, has that been tricky?
Yeah, I mean, it really is all about the front end of the hiring, and making sure we get the right people. And we do not hide the ball about who we are as a company. And along the way, by the way, if you run a sales team, I was pressured all the time to change who we were. And we're in Portland, where the culture is a little bit more laid back than what we've built. And any company all across the Portland area, we're actually in a couple places, but in Portland, all across the Portland area, there's like cold brews on tap and beer every Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. There are ping pong tables and foosball tables and Xbox places and nap rooms. And we were like, look, that just is not who we are. Like, who we are is a company that's going to invest in you. It's going to invest in the tools to make you a great sales professional or a great product management professional. But who we're not is a company that's going like, hey, I go play Xbox for 30 minutes or ping pong all day. And that was like, that put a real pressure on us early on, because we lose sort of entry level candidates who'd go like, well, you know, there's a free vending machine down at Puppet Labs, like, or why wouldn't I just go there, like, versus here? But over time, we just felt really good about that as a cultural aspect, and then we just leaned way into it. Yeah. You know, I did an interview a couple weeks ago with a guy who works at Google Cloud, and he said on his last day of the interview, he asked us, and this is years ago, really early in the journey. He asked us, so what do you guys do for fun, like together as a team? And one of our sales managers was like, every Thursday night, we go to Red Robin together as a group. We have burgers and beer, and it's the best time. And he was like, okay. And then he asked another sort of like venture-backed, fast-growing company in Portland, what do they do? And he's like, oh, you know what? Why don't you bring your wife? We're actually going wine tasting in Napa Valley this weekend. We'll put you up. That's what we do as a team. And it was like no contest. He was like, I'm 23, you know, like that was so enticing. But as you kind of grow up, you realize like, oh, you know, that Napa Valley trip is not really the thing that makes me appreciate my job. What it makes me appreciate my job and my work is the ability to come in, feel that I'm making an impact, have a manager who trusts me and lifts me up, and I have real career progression at that company. And that's what we've leaned into.
I think that's great. And it's about being unabashedly honest about who you are and who you're not, right? And even you said this exactly at the beginning, right, with the go-to-market strategy. In the beginning, you couldn't be all things to all people. And on the hiring front and on the growth front, it's the same way. One of the things I did want to hit on this point before we start to talk about the IPO, which was insane, you've also acquired a few companies along the journey here. Yep. We talked about organizational alignment inside of your company, but as you bring on other companies, how does that calculus change, you know, of getting alignment across orgs, across maybe newly acquired companies?
Yeah, it's not that different, right? You do need to be unabashedly honest about who you are and who you're not. I think the more you come in on day one and you go like, this is who we are, this is what we're going to be together as one company, and this is who we're not, and these are the places where we conflict, the better. I think we did that really well in our acquisition of Ranking, and then not so well in the acquisition of Zoominfo. Zoominfo was an interesting one for us because it was growing faster than us and one of our key, but less profitably. And so one of our key goals was don't slow the momentum in that company. And so when we went into Ranking, it was different. It was like we came in, we kicked down the doors. We're like, we're all one thing now. And we're going to do everything our way. And we went into Zoominfo and we were like, hey, we're one company now. We're going to find out all of the right things to do together. And ultimately, from a cultural perspective, it just took much longer to get everybody operating under the same sort of cultural tenets, which are like, move fast, don't lose alone. Winning is important. Don't win it's more fun to win as a group than it is to win alone too. Support everybody around you. But like, we're always consistently working hard to achieve our results. And so just kind of changing that culture over time was important, but it's also just the key piece is to be super transparent. Like you can't do anything quietly. One of the things at ZoomInfo, there was an arcade room and I was like, oh my goodness, I've spent like 13 years telling everybody at DiscoverOrg, like, this is not who we are. And now I'm walking into a world where there's like arcades, and how am I going to explain that to my staff that I've like, had this very clear understanding with? And so, what happened was I went in and I was like, we can't have this arcade. Like, what are we going to do? And everybody was like, whoa, man, like hold your horses. Like, you don't want to come in on day one and mess this whole thing up. And really, like, over time, I was just super transparent about it. I was like, look, it's just not who we are. But you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to donate all of those games to children's charities where they really should go. And that was like, it's kind of hard to argue with donating a bunch of arcade games that adults are using to the Boys and Girls Club. But being like super transparent about that is the key piece. And you just can't be embarrassed about it. Everybody is going to tell you, you always have somebody who will tell you like, oh, well, at X company, they do this. Like, and if you go down the rabbit hole of trying to solve to be everything to everybody, you will always lose. You will always lose. And so the key important thing is to go like, I understand they do that there. That's not who we are. Who we are is a company that invests in this and invests in that and is focused on your career growth or whatever it is. But you should not be ashamed of the culture you've built and the things that are important to you.
And it takes on a little bit of its own gravity at that point too, right? You attract the people that are going to get that and feel that, and not be like, oh, well, hold on, what about the nap room? What about the nap room, Henry? Right. I need that for my chakra or whatever.
I sent an email out 2 months ago that basically explained this. Like, I'm trying to build a championship team, and there are championship teams and there are not championship teams. I use the Pittsburgh Pirates as an example. Like, they're not a championship team. They don't invest in the team. They don't really care about winning a championship. But the Boston Red Sox, they always want to win a championship. That's the goal. And that's what we're building. And like, that's who we want here. And 2 days later, a director of sales in our Grand Rapids office said, look, I had this employee on my staff. She was on a PIP. She wasn't doing very well. I was sure that at some point we were going to have to let her go. She came in yesterday and she said, you know what? I read Henry's email about the Pittsburgh Pirates, and I am not the right fit for this company. Like, I just realized I'm not the right fit for this company. And that is powerful because the director of sales was like, I made a mistake on hiring. What am I going to do here? It's going to be another 6 months before like we take action here. And for people to self-select in and out, that is very valuable. Our SDR program, by the way, Richard, at the end of onboarding, you have the opportunity to take $2,000 and leave. And so at the end of onboarding, we go, look, no hard feelings. If at the end of onboarding, you don't feel like this is the right fit for you, here's $2,000. Thank you for coming. Like, we don't want to force you to be at a place that you don't feel a fit at.
What is it? It's the Netflix culture deck. Mediocre performance gets a generous severance. And I think Zappos, Tony
Zappos
Hsieh
did that.
I
stole it from Zappos.
It's great. It's flattery, right? Let's talk a little bit more about the IPO, because not only did you build this badass organization, you IPO'd it during the middle of a global pandemic. Like, you guys are crushing it. Like, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
There's a lot of folks in MSP who would love to either be part of an IPO or build a company that IPOs. Like, how did you know as the founder, and how did the team know it was time? It was time to do it.
Yeah, so we made the acquisition of ZoomInfo in February of 2019. We started putting the companies together. DiscoverOrg and ZoomInfo became one company. And we really had tremendous momentum coming out of the acquisition. Right before I talk about this, one thing to remember here is And this is very true at Zoominfo, and you can find the organizations where it's true at. But we have viewed, and sales has become an incredible strategic differentiator for our company. And I think a lot of times when you think about strategy, the person who does strategy, it becomes like product roadmap and M&A and all of this other stuff. For us, sales sat right in the middle of the strategic value and advantage of our company. And so when we were making acquisitions along the way, one of the key things that we looked at was, can we acquire a business, then apply our sales methodology and increase productivity tremendously in that business?
Yeah.
And so you'd go into a company and you'd have someone on the board go, oh, Henry, their sales process is so bad. Like this, are you sure you want to make this acquisition? It's like, actually, I'm more sure because of that I want to make this acquisition, because fixing that sales process is something that we know well, and it creates tremendous value in the ongoing company. And so I would constantly think about, are you running the most best-in-class sales organization? Because if you are, it creates an incredible strategic advantage for the company in the future. And one of the things that we were really excited about from an IPO perspective was we were going to be able to put that on view, on display. Here's how we run our go-to-market engine. We have sub 30-day sales cycles, a 10x LTV to CAC. The metrics across the go-to-market engine are really impressive. And so we wanted to put that on display. We put the companies together. They had a tremendous amount of momentum. And then we said, okay, this could be a great company on the public markets. And so we engaged with investment bankers. And, look, I think investors are looking for a couple of things, and you can kind of it depends on, you could have a lot of one and a little of another, or a lot of all of them. But for us, our investors wanted growth. They wanted profitable growth. They wanted a large total addressable market. They wanted great unit economics and efficiencies in your business. They wanted a competitive environment that they felt that you could continue to lead. For us, they wanted really clear guidance on where we expected the levers of growth in the future. And they wanted us to continue to flex an M&A muscle. And so you kind of put that all together in a deck and explaining all of those pieces of the business. And then you go out and you start having conversations with public equity investors about the business and all of those sort of key points. You answer all of their questions, and then over time, you get them comfortable enough where you're ready to IPO.
And I think that's all makes a ton of sense, and that's an awesome story. But during a global pandemic, I mean, that's pretty wild. Like, how did that, was it so much momentum, everything was just pointing like we were going to be successful, or was there a decision about
So yeah, there was. So our original IPO date was supposed to be March 26th. Which was, 13 days after basically the travel ban and a bunch of stay-at-home orders, and the market kind of just fell apart. And so we said, look, you can't really IPO now. And so let's take a step back. Let's see how the business performs through the pandemic. And it continued to perform through March, through April, through May. And then we went back out to those same investors we talked about. We said, look, here's some more detail on how the companies continued to perform. Would you like to see this on the public markets? And they said, yes, you should definitely take this company out to the public markets. And so then the question became, do you want to be the first one out? Do you want to be the first software technology stock out in 2020? Or would you rather wait for somebody else to go before you and see if you could get any learnings? Ultimately, we decided to be the first. Not now. At that point, we had a small record for a short amount of time, but we were the largest software IPO in a decade when we IPO'd. Today, obviously, Snowflake, if you're following, Snowflake IPO'd and just crushed that. But for a small period of time, we were the leader in the clubhouse.
No, I mean, it's crazy that happened. And Snowflake as well. It's crazy, right? But I'm sure if we sat down with them, it's the same story, right? These really strong first principles. I do want to change gears a little bit here and talk about kind of privacy and the role of data in selling. As I think many MSP community members know, there's the California Consumer Privacy Act. For European friends, there's GDPR. I even think on a consumer side, iOS 14 has awoken a consciousness, a more privacy consciousness in kind of the ecosystem. How does that evolve the role of data in selling, or does
Yeah,
it?
so so we should let's talk about the CCPA and the GDPR just for a second here. So
Yeah.
one, it's really interesting because these laws tend to have a carve out for business to business use cases. And so if you think about the GDPR, there's a legitimate interest for direct marketing. And that legitimate interest also says that the content that you reach out to folks with has to be relevant to their business and their profession. And so relevancy becomes a really important factor here. And obviously we're biased, but how do you get to relevancy? You use sort of characteristics about the company and the person to craft really precise messages. And so for the GDPR, one of the things that we did is we went out and gave notice to everybody in Europe whose information we had collected, and we gave them the opportunity to have that information updated, removed. They had full control over their profiles. And then when the CCPA rolled out, what the CCPA requires is that you put a link at the bottom of your website that says "Do not sell my information." You give people the ability to see the information, or California residents, the ability to see the information that you've collected on them and have that information updated or removed from your CRM or wherever you're collecting it. And for people like Zoominfo who collect data on multiple people, that requirement is the same. But we decided, look, we're going to go a step further and we're going to apply that same notice and choice framework to everybody in California. And so we went out, we gave everybody in California notice that we had collected their information. We gave them the same ability to opt out or remove that information. And then we said, well, that worked pretty well. And it put us way ahead of the regulation. The regulation actually specifically says, if you don't collect the information directly from the person, you don't have an obligation to notify the person. But we did it anyways. And then we said, we're going to do it to everybody in our database. And so we're out, we've given notice to over 60% of the people in our data set. We've collected that notice. And again, remember, that's across 100 million, 120 million professionals. So we've collected that notification. We've put it on the profiles. And then, and we've built an automated privacy center so people can control their profiles. And then we built in connectors. So if you're in your CRM and someone's opted out, you're collecting that opt-out information in your CRM, we can directly reflect that in the Zoominfo platform and hide those individuals. Because from a compliance and risk perspective, I'm sure what your legal counsel is telling you when you're going to buy one of these services is like, well, what happens when Joe, the sales guy, gets like over aggressive and starts sending emails and making calls to people who told us they didn't want that anymore? And so the ability to reflect that in all of your systems of record is incredibly important. So we built that in for our privacy conscious clients. Then the next thing about this from a B2B perspective is, if you look at like Canada's PIPEDA law, which is the privacy law in Canada, they specifically break out business to business contact information as non-sensitive information when used for the purposes of business to business sales and marketing. If you look at Nevada's law, Washington's draft law, the federal draft law, they all break out B2B use cases. The CCPA, right before it got enacted, the governor wrote an amendment that exempted B2B information for 2 years. And so look, we are in a position of trust at this point, mainly because the work that we do selling to other businesses drives a huge part of the economy. I think the last time we looked at it was like a $26 trillion part of the economy. And so no one wants to mess that up, but it is incumbent on us to not mess it up for everybody else in our space. And that means being really prescriptive about how you segment people, how you segment messages, and how you activate campaigns and segments of messaging to the right people at the right time is really important. And Richard, you said before we got on the call that in the B2C world, you used to talk about 30 segments, and now everybody talks about segments of 30. And I really do believe that is coming to the B2B space. And that is how we should be thinking, like which people and companies and characteristics of a company have the right, are aligned or similar enough that we can do really targeted messaging and really targeted segmenting to those groups, and sort of keep B2B marketing and sales above the fray.
And it comes back to even what you said before, and just in terms of first principles of running an effective business, being very focused on what problems you're good at solving, what people, even when your organization, right, who you're hiring. Are we hiring people that want to be the best accounts receivable person in the world? Or are they just looking for a job with a free tap room? I think we could spend a ton of time just on that concept. But Henry, I mean, you sat at a very interesting position for a very long time. You've seen a lot of things evolve, and we started to talk about the future a little bit, the future of tech, the future of sales. You're actually doing some interesting things with your SDR organization. But if you can take a step back, what do you think the future of sort of revenue disciplines look like? Sales ops wasn't a thing when you guys were getting started, or it was a very new thing, and now it's like a strategic differentiator. So what's the future look like? What do you see?
So definitely more data centric, more data focused. I think you are going to continue to see a rise of revenue ops and sales ops. People are expecting to use data to drive their resources in the most effective and efficient way. So you will continue to see that. I think the thing that I think is most exciting about the future is the ability to take your first party data and third party data from like Zoominfo, combine those together and then activate instantly. And so we've built in the Zoominfo platform a functionality called workflows, where you can go in and you can say, look, here's the universe of companies I'm interested in, software companies over $100 million in these states that are backed by VC or private equity. And then anytime a company in this segment spikes on an intent topic that's relevant to my business, I want to capture my ideal buyer at those companies, VPs of IT, directors of information security, whatever. And then I want to put those directly into an outreach sequence or a sales loft sequence or an engage sequence. I want to run them through a marketing automation sequence. I want to put them in a campaign in Salesforce. I want to put Facebook ads against them. And building that motion so that it's instantly firing across those segments of 30 that is the future vision. And if you can bring your data in, combine it with third-party data, and then run dozens of these motions, that's incredibly powerful. Because if you think about it, as sales reps or sales teams and marketing teams, we've been for the last decade trapped in a world where our first-party data doesn't talk to our third-party data. And so you can run all sorts of these motions based on like, if people click links in your email or they visit the pricing page or any number of different things, but you can't combine that action with what's happening outside of the four corners of your website. And there's a tremendous amount of insight that's happening outside of your website. Companies are growing, they're shrinking, they're adding new technologies, they're removing technologies, they're adding new benefits brokers, new HR plans. So to be able to capture that and link it to your first party data and then automate that motion, that is absolutely the future of how we go to market over the next decade.
And I think it's great. It's a phenomenal point for those of us who've been in the B2C world, where we spent a bunch of time talking about how do we merge first party and third party data to do it. It's great to see Henry kind of on the fore of it. We're going to move forward here and take some questions that folks submitted during registration and some questions that came in live here. For those of you who are in and online here, go ahead and submit your questions using the Q&A panel. Henry, first question, and this is a question that came in from Connor here, and I'm putting you on the spot with it, but I think it's an interesting one for your perspective. Do you see sales, revenue operations, do you see that discipline being more of a sales or a finance-driven function as we move forward?
Yeah, I love this question because at Zoominfo, it is a sales function, but we regularly steal resources from FP&A and put them into that sales ops and revenue ops function. And so I think what you're seeing is that skill set is overlapping. And so regardless of where it sits, and look, my opinion is that it should sit in sales, but regardless of where it sits, you should be cognizant of the fact that you can grab talent from finance organizations and then you reallocate them into that sales and revenue ops organization, where a lot of that motion, the thinking about modeling and statistics and pulling data sets together is similar in FP&A as it is in sales and revenue ops. And so when we go out and look for new talent in those organizations, we don't just look for previous sales ops and revenue ops leaders. Remember, like, at least revenue ops is a newish title. And so limiting your recruiting and talent acquisition efforts to just that title is just going to limit you. We look for FP&A analysts, finance analysts, investment banking analysts. Those folks have the same gears as the revenue and sales ops folks. And so we look for them in both.
And I think that discipline has evolved a ton in the past 10 years. It has a seat at the table, whereas maybe 5 or 10 years ago, rev or sales ops was like Salesforce reporting and maybe a little bit of spreadsheeting and commission management.
Yep. It has changed for sure.
Another question coming in here, and this is a live one. What do you say? And this is a great question too. What do you say to folks who say B2B sales reps are becoming obsolete?
Yeah, so it's certainly a growing field. So I don't know where they're getting their data, but I'll use a quote that Mark Benioff said, which is really great, I thought. He said, our software is not bought, it's sold. And that's a really important mantra, right? B2B software is not bought, it is sold. And most of the solutions we're selling aren't just like you plug it in and then boom, you're off to the races. They require some consulting and solutioning around around the solution. Like, we could turn you on to Zoominfo tomorrow and you could do some lookups of companies and people. But really the work that we do with our clients is to get you from a lookup tool to something that's automating a workflow that's feeding your CRM and marketing automation tools that you're getting insights out of. And you need a B2B salesperson to help you through that process. And so I think it'll continue to get more consultative. It'll continue to be more solutioning, but it's not going away.
I like the way that Brian Halligan put it in the kind of the future is different deck. He said the buying experience will get more consumer grade, right? It will be easier to buy. And that just means people are going to feel more comfortable maybe swiping a credit card, whereas before I had to issue a PO. But to Henry, to your point, and I agree with that. I think that the complexity and to get the full value from something, it is a consultation is required, not because you like selling services, but because you want to make sure people get a ton out of the value out of it that they're making. Exactly.
Yes, that's right. Yep.
You're going to take
especially by the way, Richard, in the subscription business, right? Like, most of us are in a subscription business. And if you're in a subscription business, like, you get graded every year, and that grade is pass or fail. And when it comes up for renewal, the work that you did through the process to be consultative and make sure that a customer not only sees the value, but gets the value is going to become really important in the long-term viability of your business.
And I think, and I want to actually double click into this notion, and I think where the question comes from in some ways is this notion of product-led growth, right? Like, Slack doesn't have a sales team. How many times have you heard that thrown around? I think that what oftentimes folks mistake is having a product that is easy to service onto and something that doesn't have a sales team. Like, Slack is easy to get set up, but to take full advantage of, you need to really, really know what the heck you're doing there.
Totally.
So a couple more questions here, and these are coming in live. So
both of those are great questions.
It's good. We love it when MSP shows up with good questions. This is a live question, and this is just a little bit more in depth around that 5 to 25 run that you made. What evolved in your strategy and execution? And then also you mentioned kind of your go-to-market organization was run and gun. So there had to have been some evolutions that happened from 5 to 25. Can you talk a little bit about those?
So interestingly, 5 to 15 was probably or 5 to 12 was probably the least difficult jump. Really, like, what you had built to get you to 5 with kind of more leads and a little bit more capacity would get you to 15 or 12 to 15. What came after that, and where we struggled the most, and in our business, we had built a motion that generated lots of leads. And so we were feeding all of our account executives with those leads. But what was very hard for us was getting the right account executives in the door and then keeping them in seats. And so we would hire like 3 account executives and we'd lose all of them. Like 3 months later, none of them stuck. Or you'd hire 6 and maybe 1 would stay. And it was killing the business. And so we would sit around at the end of the night, I remember one specific meeting where we said, look, let's talk about what are the factors that made these people not be successful here? What did we miss in the hiring process? And then let's create a matrix and we'll rank people that way. That was a good start, but it was super subjective. And so 5 people would feel differently about a person. And they'd rank them differently on all sorts of criteria. And so what we ended up doing was we took all of our sales reps and we had them all take a cognitive assessment. And we tried a bunch of different tests. We ended up at the time using a test called the Omnia test, which is basically this cognitive test that we gave all of our account executives. And then you saw all of the successful account executives were kind of above a certain mark. And it was the first time we had used a test where the results were so correlative to the success. And so we said, okay, we're clearly not good at hiring account executives into our business when we're left to make the decision. But this thing at least is a consistent score on account executives who work. And so everybody would come in, we'd give them this test. It was 12 minutes. And so it wasn't like this hour-long test that they had to do. They'd take a 12-minute test and then you'd have a pretty good sense of whether they were gonna succeed or not at our company at that stage. And that worked. And we were able to hire and keep our account executive employees. And that really, getting that talent in the door really is what drove us from 5 to 25. You had the right account executives, the right structure to deliver leads to those account executives, and we were able to scale that way. That was a key piece of the whole thing.
The hiring part, you can't understate that, right? We see those questions pop up all the time in modern sales pros. Like, how do I find good people? How do I keep them? And a lot of it comes back to doing that debrief of when somebody leaves the organization. What did we miss? Or was it a good thing that that person left? So a bunch of more great questions in here. This is actually something that we talked about on during our prep session. You've done some work building sales orgs and maybe not less expensive markets than like New York, San Francisco, and Boston.
Yep.
How do you feel that's going to evolve post-COVID? Because that Zoominfo was an in-person culture, if I'm correct, before the start of things.
Yeah. So I think the way we're thinking about this today is we have not lost productivity in our business since the pandemic. In fact, in a lot of places, we increased productivity. Yesterday, we had an 1,100 demo day. And so our SDR team set 1,100 demos yesterday, and we've done 1,000 demo days and 600 demo days. And yesterday was an 1,100 demo day. We were trying to get to 1,200, so we still fell a little bit short. But the way we think about it now is there is a different motion to running a team in-house and running a remote team. And so what we're looking at in the future is we can have a remote team of SDRs. We're okay with that, but we're not going to have a manager manage a couple people in-house and a couple people remotely. We think combining those two things just makes for a complicated setup, and it's just a different motion and a different set of experiences that you want for someone managing a team in-house and a team remotely. And so we will look at opportunities to keep fully remote SDR teams. We obviously have the technology stack to do that. And so yeah, we will continue to have fully remote SDR teams into the future.
I think it's always interesting to see how organizations are thinking about it. I think it's a new world for sales leadership and leadership in general.
Yeah, totally.
Question coming in about more of the founding story and coming back to like the early days, right? When you were getting started, was there a moment where you wanted to give up? And if there was, what was it that kind of kept you going or helped you swim to the next buoy and keep it to growing to what it is today?
Yeah, that's interesting. Look, I don't think I ever I ever really wanted to give up. I think along the way, there were definitely like difficult times, and you would lose customers to your competitors, and you'd second guess kind of like what you were doing. But I never felt like I should give the thing up. I mean, and we were lucky enough to have a business that was growing every year. So it was kind of hard to look at this growing business and go like, yeah, I'm going to hang up the cleats here. The thing that I will tell you is that if you're in a business, if you're starting your own business and it's successful, one of the things you should be actively managing is the thoughts that enter your mind, often from your friends and family who go, hey, so what are you going to do next? It feels like as soon as you like get success in a business that you founded, people go like, oh, so what are you going to do next? When are you going to retire? When are you going to hang it up? And those thoughts are dangerous because you kind of start thinking like, oh, what do I want to do next? And blah, 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 blah. And, maybe I do want to sit on a beach for the rest of my life. And you have to be honest with yourself about what that looks and feels like. Like, I love what I do at Zoominfo. It's hard on lots of days. But it is challenging and fun. And I get to work with really smart people that I hand selected and believe in the vision. And replicating that is really hard to do. And so really appreciating the work that you're doing and the opportunity that you have and how unique it is, I think is really important, because the minute you kind of like, you can spin a drain on what am I going to do next forever.
That's great advice. I love that. Like, hey, really stay focused. Make sure you know what you're in it for. We're gonna there's one more question I want to give to Henry here, and then we'll take live Q&A really up until the end. The questions that everyone submitted are great, but this is one that I wanted to make sure that we gave Henry a chance for. He comes from a little bit of a non-traditional background, and there's a really great article that you wrote about the college admission scandal that happened here in the States. And in that article, you talk about, kind of your background and how you built this $25 million company, and you didn't go to Yale or Harvard or whatever. Sales is a discipline like that, right? People end up in sales. No one really goes to school for it. Same thing with operations. Yep. What kind of advice do you have for folks that are either thinking about starting a company, and you got into it a little bit, but advice for folks that are, maybe from those non-traditional backgrounds looking to get started or are starting something and kind of saying like, hey, what the hell am I doing?
Yeah, I think the key part of this whole thing is finding a place where your talents align very well with whatever you're doing. And I think about like when I was in law school, I would work tremendously hard on briefs or projects or assignments. It would take me hours to do these things. And I did well in law school, but I worked really, really hard. And then I had a roommate who I would work on a brief for like days, and he'd come in 2 hours before it was due, sit down at his computer, boom, and get the highest grade in the class. And I was always like, what the heck, man? Like, I just don't have, he's just so much smarter than me, is what I started thinking. Like, that guy is just way smarter than I am. And the truth is, like, he's not smarter than me. He's just lined his talents up perfectly for what he should be doing in the future. I think about it like I tried to learn how to play golf, and I'm awful at golf. And no matter how hard I tried, I would get like a little bit better, but other people would come in, they'd sit down, they'd work for an hour, and boom, they were like, way better than I was. And it was like my talents just didn't line up. At Zoominfo, what I always felt like was I could put in some amount of effort, and the results that I would get from that effort were always exponential to the effort that I was putting in. I turned into my roommate who came in at the last minute, did 2 hours of work, and then had a better end result than what took days for me to accomplish. And so I think it's really important that you look for that lineup of talent. And it kind of like, as cliche as the whole like find a job that you love and you'll never work a day in your life saying is, like, if you find a job or you find work that you can put in effort and get and see impact and real results, I would hang on to that thing for as long as you can. And in this business, I always felt that way. Every ounce of energy I put in, I felt like I was getting exponential results from. And so it never really did feel like work. And in the process, like in law school, I had lots of friends from law school who were incredibly talented, who would make, you know, $300,000+ a year being an account executive out of sales in software sales. And they went and they became attorneys. They generally hate their existence. They work at a big company. And I remember talking to one of my friends after law school, and I said, hey man, like, how are things going? He's one of my smartest friends. He was super personable, played sports. Everybody really liked him. And he went to work at a big Fortune 100 legal department. I was like, so when are you going to become general counsel at that? Like, how are you moving up the ladder? He's like, moving up the ladder? Like, I'm trying to get ignored as often as possible here. Like, I don't even want people to know that I work here. I think if they'll forget about me, I won't have to do anything. And I was like, oh my goodness, like the legal career robbed him of his potential. Like, cause he would have been a tremendous sales leader or sales executive. And he just took this weird path because he didn't really appreciate how his talents lined up with where he could sort of get the most exponential result. And so I would say, like, I would look really hard at lining your talent up with the right role and the right company, because when you do that, the results really are exponential.
And I think there's something that you mentioned when we were first getting our conversation started that dovetails really nicely into that point: transparency. But you got to be honest with yourself. Right?
Yes.
We're all great storytellers. We're in sales. We're in operations. But be transparent and honest with yourself so you can line up those superpowers.
Yep, absolutely.
Henry, this was awesome. I really do appreciate you taking some time out of your incredibly busy day to share the Zoominfo story with me, with all of our folks in attendance, with the 20,000 MSP members. This is the most fun I've had doing one of these in a really long time. And your passion shines through on this. And the success of Zoominfo is not surprising at all after having met you and had this conversation. So on behalf of everybody in the community, Henry, thank you so much for this. Stay safe and best of luck with everything that's next for Zoominfo.
Thank you, Richard. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate everybody joining.
Awesome. All right, everybody. Take care, Henry. Take care. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
All right.